If a teacher tells you to give up on your dream because it's too big, will you silently endure or prove them wrong? In the impoverished neighborhood of Jackson Heights, where cramped alleys and gray buildings crowded beneath a gloomy sky, there was a small apartment tucked away in an old row of houses. This was where Carter Hayes lived with his mother, Angela Hayes. Angela worked 2 jobs at the Lucky Spin laundromat, where the scent of detergent and the rumbling of washing machines created a monotonous melody, and as a janitor at the hospital. Every evening she returned home with rough hands and tired eyes, but always greeted Carter with a smile. Carter was a different kind of child. While other kids in the neighborhood played in the streets, he sat by the window, eyes glued to old math books borrowed from the public library. Numbers, equations, and graphs formed his own world, a place where he could forget the shouting outside or the wailing sirens echoing through the night. But Carter didn't just love math, he lived it. He didn't just want to memorize theorems, he wanted to understand them, to make them his own language. He solved complex problems that even his teachers struggled with. Yet Jackson Heights was not a place for big dreams. Dreams were suffocated between cracked walls and judgmental glares. One rainy afternoon, the downpour lashed against the stained windows, and Carter huddled by his study desk, eyes fixed on an old math book. It was a book he'd found in a free book bin outside the library, its cover torn, but inside was a treasure trove of knowledge. The desk lamp flickered and then went out. The electricity in the apartment was gone again, another unpaid bill. Angela sighed, fetched a candle, and placed it on Carter's desk. "Are you okay, Carter?" she asked, her eyes full of concern. "I'm fine, Mom," Carter replied, his voice steady but his gaze determined. The candlelight cast shadows on Carter's face, and Angela saw a flame in his eyes, something she couldn't fully understand, a desire, an almost irrational belief. "Mom," Carter said, looking up, "I'm going to Harvard." Angela froze. Harvard? That was not a place for a boy like Carter. It was a place for the rich, where only powerful families could open the doors. But Angela didn't say that. She just smiled, gently stroking her son's curly hair. "If that's what you want, Carter, I'll always be behind you." Carter smiled. That was all he needed. At school, Carter was a quiet student. He sat at the back of the class, avoiding mocking glances and snickers. Other kids called him the book boy, and no one wanted to befriend him except one person, Mr. Harold Whitman. Mr. Whitman was a thin, elderly man in a dark blue janitor's uniform with yellow rubber gloves, known to everyone as the old janitor. But to Carter, he was a living treasure of knowledge. Every afternoon after school, while Mr. Whitman swept the hallways, Carter would sit outside the supply room, book in hand, asking endless questions. Why does the Pythagorean theorem only apply to right triangles? What happens if we take an exponential function to infinity? Mr. Whitman would only smile. "You have a sharp mind, Carter. But math is not just numbers. It's a way of seeing the world." No one knew that Mr. Whitman had once been a mathematics professor at a small university before life pushed him into the shadows of manual labor. To Carter, he was a mentor, and to Mr. Whitman, Carter was hope. One evening, while Angela was preparing dinner from the few ingredients left in the fridge, Carter approached her, holding a crumpled piece of paper. "Mom, this is the scholarship exam for the summer program at Harvard," Carter said, his voice trembling with excitement. "If I get selected, I'll study there for free this summer." Angela looked at the paper. Harvard, that name again. It was like a mountain she never dared dream of. "Carter, are you sure?" "I'm certain," Carter said, his eyes shining with determination. Angela said nothing more. She reached into her purse, pulled out some spare change, all she had, and handed it to Carter. "Buy whatever you need to prepare. I believe in you." Carter smiled, hugging his mother. In that embrace, gaze. During recess, he often stood alone by the trees at the far end of the schoolyard, watching other kids play together. Laughter echoed across the yard, but none of it was meant for him. "NASA boy! Liar!" Occasionally, some kids would pretend to be astronauts, running around with their arms outstretched, making rocket noises. "I'm Jaden's dad, flying to the moon." Each taunt felt like a dagger cutting into Jaden's pride. He knew he wasn't lying. His father really worked at NASA, But the truth had become a curse, a burden he carried alone. Inside the classroom, things were no better. Ms. Parker, who used to encourage all her students, now regarded Jaden with a cold, indifferent gaze. Whenever he raised his hand to answer, she would look past him as if he were invisible. "Anyone else want to answer this question?" she would say, ignoring his small, hopeful hand. If another student made a mistake on an assignment, she would gently explain the correct answer. But when Jaden submitted his work, she would glance at it briefly and mark it with red ink. "Be more careful, Jaden." Even when he asked to go out for water, she would reply with a mocking tone, "Oh, are you going to contact NASA?" The class would erupt in laughter, while Jaden bowed his head, trying to hide the tears welling in his eyes. Every day at school became a nightmare. Jaden no longer dared to look anyone in the eye. His steps became heavy, and his heart ached at the thought of another school day. At home, Jaden grew quieter. His mother would ask, "How was school today, sweetheart?" "It was fine," Jaden would answer, forcing a smile. But his parents noticed something was wrong. His father often came home late from work, but whenever he was home, he would tell Jaden stories about space, about the research missions he and his team were working on. "Did you know, Jaden? NASA is developing a new spacecraft that can travel even farther than Mars." Jaden would nod, but his eyes no longer sparkled as they once did. In the evening, in his small room, Jaden sat silently by his desk. The drawings of spaceships he once loved, which he had drawn himself, now seemed dull. The model space probe that his father had built with him last year sat lifeless on the shelf, a thin layer of dust gathering on its surface. He missed those nights when his father would sit beside him, telling stories about stars, explaining how rockets launched into space, and sharing humanity's dream of exploring the universe. But now those memories only made Jaden's heart feel heavier. "What did I do wrong?" he whispered to himself in the darkness. "Why doesn't anyone believe me?" He didn't want to lie. His father really worked at NASA, but the truth had become a curse, a burden he carried alone. Night after night, Jaden curled up under his blanket, trying to keep warm as tears soaked his pillow. One evening during dinner, his mother looked at him with concern. "Jaden, what's wrong? You're not as cheerful as before. Did something happen at school?" "Nothing, Mom. I'm just tired." His father frowned but tried to speak gently. "Son, if something's bothering you, you can always tell us." Jaden looked down, focusing on his food without saying another word. After dinner, his parents sat together in the living room, exchanging worried glances. "I feel like something has happened at school," his mother whispered, her voice trembling. "I think so too," his father sighed. "Tomorrow I'll try to talk to Miss Parker and see how things are in class." Jaden overheard their conversation from his room, but he didn't feel relieved. He feared that if his parents found out, everything would only get worse. He wanted his parents to be proud of him, not worried. But the more he tried to bear it alone, the lonelier he felt. That night, Jaden lay curled up in his blanket, his heart aching. Where was the way out of this loneliness? Jaden thought that being isolated was the worst thing that could happen. But he was wrong. The silence he endured in the classroom was only the beginning. The teasing words gradually turned into actions. "Hey, NASA boy, flown to the sky yet? Have you seen your dad riding a rocket to school?" The kids no longer just mocked him with words. They started snatching Jaden's backpack, throwing his books to the ground. Once, as Jaden was retrieving his books from his locker, someone from the group pushed him hard from behind. He fell onto the cold, tiled floor, his books scattered everywhere. They laughed gleefully, while Jaden quietly picked them up, his hands trembling. He wanted to fight back, to stand up for himself, but every time he tried to speak, Ms. Parker's mocking voice echoed in his head. "Come on, Jaden, stop telling stories." He felt like a liar in everyone's eyes, even when he was telling the truth. And so Jaden chose to remain silent. Everything escalated on a Friday afternoon. It was drizzling lightly, and the students were allowed inside the classroom earlier than usual. Jaden sat quietly at his desk, trying to finish his math homework while laughter echoed around him. Suddenly, a group of kids approached him. Leading them was Ethan, the most popular boy in class, with his curly blonde hair and bright, sparkling eyes. "Hey, NASA boy," Ethan called out loudly, drawing the attention of the whole class. Jaden tried to ignore him, keeping his head down and focusing on his work. "Are you calculating the trajectory to the moon?" Another kid laughed. Ethan glanced over Jaden's shoulder and then turned back to his friends. "You know, I think he needs some NASA technology to make it look more real." Before Jaden could understand what was happening, a cold, sticky liquid poured over his head. It wasn't water. It was thick and clung to his curly black hair. Glue. Super glue. "Oh no! Don't tell me that's an astronaut's wig," Ethan shouted, and the whole group burst into laughter. Jaden froze. He reached up to touch his head, feeling the thick layer of glue quickly hardening, sticking to his curls. He couldn't pull it out. The entire class laughed. Some even secretly recorded it on their phones. Jaden stood up, tears welling up in his eyes, but he didn't cry. Not in front of them. He ran out of the classroom straight to the restroom. Standing in front of the mirror, he saw his reflection. His once neatly combed curls now matted, tangled, and covered in glue. Tears streamed down his cheeks as he desperately tried to pull the glue out. But each tug felt like tearing his scalp. Jaden knew what he had to do. He rushed to the teacher's lounge where Ms. Parker was chatting with some other teachers. "Ms. Parker," Jaden called, his voice choked with emotion. Ms. Parker turned, a slight look of annoyance crossing her face. "Jaden? What is it now?" Jaden pointed at his hair, the glue sticking to his black curls. They poured glue on my hair." Ms. Parker glanced at him for a second, then sighed. "Jaden, stop making a big deal out of everything. You always want to be the center of attention, don't you?" But this is real glue. My head hurts." "It's just a prank, Jaden. You need to learn to take a joke," she replied, her eyes passing over him like he was just an inconvenience. Jaden stood there stunned. It felt like the ground beneath him was falling away. "Go back to class, and next time, try not to be an easy target for jokes," Ms. Parker said, turning away. The door closed, leaving Jaden standing alone in the empty hallway. The pain on his scalp was nothing compared to the ache in his heart. That afternoon, Jaden returned home, trying to hide his hair under a cap, but his parents noticed immediately. "Jaden, what happened?" his mother asked worriedly, moving closer to him. Jaden didn't answer. He just stood there, his eyes red. His father approached, gently removing the cap from his head, and immediately froze. "Who did this?" his father asked, his voice deep but filled with anger. Jaden's voice broke as he recounted everything. The mocking, the isolation, the glue poured on his hair, and Ms. Parker's indifference. His mother pulled him into a tight hug, tears streaming down her cheeks. "We can't let this continue," his father said, his voice sharp and resolute. "Tomorrow we're going to talk to the school, and if they don't handle it, I'll make sure it gets sorted out." Jaden looked up at his father, seeing in his eyes a fierce determination, a burning protectiveness. And for the first time in many days, he didn't feel alone. Jaden thought that being isolated was the worst thing that could happen, but he was wrong. The silence he endured in the classroom was only the beginning. The teasing words gradually turned into actions. "Hey, NASA boy, flown to the sky yet? Have you seen your dad riding a rocket to school?" The kids no longer just mocked him with words. They started snatching Jaden's backpack, throwing his books to the ground. Once, as Jaden was retrieving his books from his locker, someone from the group pushed him hard from behind. He fell onto the cold, tiled floor, his books scattered everywhere. They laughed gleefully while Jaden quietly picked them up, his hands trembling. He wanted to fight back, to stand up for himself, but every time he tried to speak, Miss Parker's mocking voice echoed in his head. "Come on, Jaden, stop telling stories." He felt like a liar in everyone's eyes, even when he was telling the truth. And so Jaden chose to remain silent. Everything escalated on a Friday afternoon. It was drizzling lightly, and the students were allowed inside the classroom earlier than usual. Jaden sat quietly at his desk, trying to finish his math homework while laughter echoed around him. Suddenly, a group of kids approached him. Leading them was Ethan, the most popular boy in class, with his curly blonde hair and bright, sparkling eyes. "Hey, NASA boy," Ethan called out loudly, drawing the attention of the whole class. Jaden tried to ignore him, keeping his head down and focusing on his work. "Are you calculating the trajectory to the moon?" Another kid laughed. Ethan glanced over Jaden's shoulder and then turned back to his friends. You know, I think he needs some NASA technology to make it look more real. Before Jaden could understand what was happening, a cold, sticky liquid poured over his head. It wasn't water. It was thick and clung to his curly black hair. Glue. Super glue. "Oh no! Don't tell me that's an astronaut's wig!" Ethan shouted, and the whole group burst into laughter. Jaden froze. He reached up to touch his head, feeling the thick layer of glue quickly hardening, sticking to his curls. He couldn't pull it out. The entire class laughed. Some even secretly recorded it on their phones. Jaden stood up, tears welling up in his eyes, but he didn't cry. Not in front of them. He ran out of the classroom, straight to the restroom. Standing in front of the mirror, he saw his reflection. His once neatly combed curls now matted, tangled, and covered in glue. Tears streamed down his cheeks as he desperately tried to pull the glue out, but each tug felt like tearing his scalp. Jaden knew what he had to do. He rushed to the teacher's lounge, where Miss Parker was chatting with some other teachers. "Miss Parker!" Jaden called, his voice choked with emotion. Miss Parker turned, a slight look of annoyance crossing her face. "Jaden? What is it now?" Jaden pointed at his hair, the glue sticking to his black curls. They poured glue on my hair." Miss Parker glanced at him for a second, then sighed. "Jaden, stop making a big deal out of everything. You always want to be the center of attention, don't you?" But this is real glue. My head hurts." "It's just a prank, Jaden. You need to learn to take a joke," she replied, her eyes passing over him like he was just an inconvenience. Jaden stood there stunned. It felt like the ground beneath him was falling away. "Go back to class, and next time, try not to be an easy target for jokes," Miss Parker said, turning away. The door closed, leaving Jaden standing alone in the empty hallway. The pain on his scalp was nothing compared to the ache in his heart. That afternoon, Jaden returned home, trying to hide his hair under a cap, but his parents noticed immediately. "Jaden, what happened?" his mother asked worriedly, moving closer to him. Jaden didn't answer. He just stood there, his eyes red. His father approached, gently removing the cap from his head, and immediately froze. "Who did this?" his father asked, his voice deep but filled with anger. Jaden's voice broke as he recounted everything. The mocking, the isolation, the glue poured on his hair, and Miss Parker's indifference. His mother pulled him into a tight hug, tears streaming down her cheeks. "We can't let this continue," and his father said, his voice sharp and resolute. "Tomorrow we're going to talk to the school, and if they don't handle it, I'll make sure it gets sorted out." Jaden looked up at his father, seeing in his eyes a fierce determination, a burning protectiveness. And for the first time in many days, he didn't feel alone. Miss Parker sat alone in her small apartment, the dim light casting a pale glow on her weary face. The room was so quiet she could hear the ticking of the clock with each passing second. On the table, her laptop remained open, flooded with dozens of emails from the school administration and other teachers. Most of them demanding explanations, but some expressing disappointment, even outright criticism. Her phone screen constantly lit up with notifications from social media, angry comments, critical messages, and even missed calls from unknown numbers. Her reputation had been tarnished across the school and in parent groups. "How did things turn out like this?" she whispered, her trembling hand gripping a mug of coffee that had long since gone cold. Memories replayed in her mind like a horror film. Her mocking smile at Jaden, the helpless look in his eyes, the laughter of the students, and that moment when glue poured over Jaden's curly black hair. She couldn't deny it any longer. She was wrong, not just wrong in her actions, but wrong from the very way she thought. But why? Why had she reacted that way to Jaden? A strange unease rose in her chest, a mix of shame and fear. That night, Ms. Parker couldn't sleep. She lay in bed, the faint light from the bedside lamp reflecting off the ceiling. Memories of her childhood surfaced one by one. Growing up in a small town where differences were always met with scrutiny, she had learned to fit in by trying to conform. She had always tried to keep everything in order, believing that was the only way to maintain discipline and success. But that mindset had made her rigid and biased. When Jaden said his father worked at NASA, she had immediately doubted him. Not because she thought he was lying, but because in her mind, big dreams like that were not meant for kids like Jaden, a quiet, different child with dark skin. "I've become the kind of person I once hated," she whispered, tears rolling down her cheeks. The next morning, still in the dim light of her room, Miss Parker decided to do something she never thought she would. She picked up her phone and dialed the school office. "Hello, this is Miss Parker. I would like to request a meeting with Jaden's family to personally apologize." Principal Johnson was surprised. "Are you sure? Given your current situation, I think it would be best if you waited until things calm down." "No, I need to do this. I was wrong, and I have to face the consequences." Principal Johnson paused for a moment, then sighed. "I will make the arrangements." That afternoon, Jaden's family agreed to meet Miss Parker in the principal's office. No longer the cold, distant teacher with a thin, mocking smile, Miss Parker arrived looking exhausted, her hair hastily tied and her eyes filled with remorse. Jaden sat between his parents, his eyes fixed on the table, unwilling to look at her. His father sat upright, his gaze sharp but silent. His mother's eyes were red, but she remained resolute. "Ms. Parker," Principal Johnson began, "you said you wanted to apologize to Jaden's family." Ms. Parker took a deep breath, her voice trembling. I want to say that I am truly sorry, not just because I failed to protect Jaden, but because I hurt him. I didn't just fail as a teacher, I failed as a human being." She bowed her head. "Jaden, I don't expect you to forgive me right away, but I hope you understand that I am trying to change. I was wrong for not believing you, for not standing by you, and I want to make things right." Silence filled the room. Jaden looked up, his eyes a mixture of anger and pain. "You never asked me the truth. You just assumed I was lying because I was me." Those words cut Miss Parker like a knife. "I thought that if I stayed quiet, if I did everything right, people would accept me. But they didn't." Jaden's father spoke, his voice slow but powerful. "An apology cannot erase what you did, but it can be the first step. We don't need empty words. We need to see change." Miss Parker nodded, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I will change, I promise." The next day, Miss Parker submitted her resignation, but Principal Johnson didn't immediately accept it. "I don't think you should give up, Parker. If you truly prove that genius could come from anywhere, even from a poor neighborhood." Outside the window, the moonlight filtered through the cracked window, casting a soft glow over Carter's face. And in the darkness of that small room, a young genius was preparing to prove his truth. Carter Hayes did not go straight home after school. His feet led him to the old public library at the corner of the street, a place that had become his second home over the years. The foggy glass door with the faded lettering, Hollow Creek Central Library, creaked open, releasing the familiar scent of old paper and dusty books. Carter stepped in, his eyes red, but he quickly lowered his head to hide it. He didn't want anyone to see him like this, especially not Mrs. Agatha, the elderly librarian with silver hair, like mist but sharp, caring eyes. "Hello, Carter," Mrs. Agatha's voice came from behind the counter. "Here early today? Did another tough problem challenge you?" Carter forced a smile. "Yes, just a few, but I will figure it out." "I know you will," Mrs. Agatha smiled warmly. "I always believe in you, Carter. A smart boy like you, there's nothing you can't achieve." Carter nodded, quickly heading to the shelves in the back, where he usually sat. The familiar math books were neatly lined up. Geometry, algebra, calculus. They were his world. But today, the pages seemed blurred before his eyes. The formulas and theorems he loved so much were now just meaningless symbols. The humiliation from Mr. Whitmore, the scornful looks of his classmates, they all felt like knives carving into his pride. His mind spun with questions. What did I do wrong? I didn't cheat. I studied hard. But why won't they believe me? Suddenly, a familiar voice broke the silence. "What's got you so tense, young genius?" Carter looked up. It was Thomas, a young college student who often came to the library to study. He was tall, with messy black curls and a pair of glasses that always seemed to slip down his nose. Thomas was one of the few people outside Mrs. Agatha who genuinely cared about Carter, often chatting with him about math and science. Carter hesitated, but then all his emotions seemed to burst out. "Thomas, they said I cheated. They don't believe I could solve the math test." Thomas sat down beside him, gently placing a hand on his shoulder. "Who said that?" "Your teacher?" Carter nodded, tears welling up again. "He said he's going to report it. I don't know what to do. I didn't do anything wrong, but I'm scared." Thomas looked deep into Carter's eyes, his gaze serious but filled with sympathy. "Carter, listen to me. When you're better than people expect, they will always doubt you. But that's not your fault. That's their limited thinking. But I don't want to be seen as a cheater. I just want to be good. I want a chance at Harvard." Thomas smiled, gently ruffling Carter's hair. "You know what? Geniuses are never recognized at first. They are always doubted, always tested. But that's how you prove your worth. You don't need to prove it to Mr. Whitmore. You only need to prove it to yourself." Carter remained silent, but his eyes brightened a little. Thomas was right. He didn't need to fear others' doubts. He just needed to hold on to his belief in himself. "What do you want to do now?" Thomas asked. "I want to prove that I didn't cheat," Carter answered, his voice growing stronger. "I want to show them that I'm not just a poor kid with a dream. I want to show them I'm genuinely good at math." Thomas nodded. "Then let's start from here. What do you want to prove, and how do you want to prove it?" Carter thought for a moment, then his eyes lit up. "I'll resolve the test myself, but not just redo it. I'll solve it in different ways, explaining every step." "That's the Carter Hayes I know," Thomas laughed. "And if you need help, I'm here." "Thank you, Thomas," Carter whispered, his eyes still wet but now filled with determination. That night, Carter returned home feeling lighter. His mother, Angela Hayes, was tidying the living room after another long shift at the hospital. The dim kitchen light cast a soft glow over her tired but gentle face. "Mom," Carter called softly. Angela turned, smiling even though her eyes showed clear signs of fatigue. "Hello, Carter. How was your day? Everything okay?" Carter stood silently for a moment, then stepped forward and hugged her tightly. "Mom, if I get into trouble, will you believe me?" Angela hesitated but then gently stroked his hair. "You are everything to me, Carter. No matter what happens, I will always believe you." Her words were like a soothing balm, washing away Carter's worries. He knew that even if the whole world turned against him, he would always have a place to come home to in his mother's embrace. That night, Carter sat by his small study desk in his modest room. In front of him were the math books he loved, sheets of blank paper, and his worn-down pencil. But this time, he wasn't just studying for his dream of Harvard. He was studying to prove that what he achieved was no fluke. He was studying to prove that genius could come from anywhere, even from a poor neighborhood. Outside the window, the moonlight filtered through the cracked window, casting a soft glow over Carter's face. And in the darkness of that small room, a young genius was preparing to prove his truth. 3 days had passed since Carter Hayes had stunned the entire class with his remarkable problem-solving skills. Rumors about the math prodigy spread quickly through the halls of William High. The students who once looked down on Carter now saw him with a mixture of awe and envy. But not everyone was pleased. In the teacher's lounge, Mr. Whitmore sat silently, staring out the window, his face tense and brooding. He had always prided himself on being a strict and discerning teacher, but Carter had made him feel small. This feeling of losing control gnawed at him. "You have to bring him down," a voice whispered in Mr. Whitmore's mind. "That boy needs to learn his place." Meanwhile, in a quiet corner of the old school library, Carter was once again engrossed in his books. He didn't care about the whispers outside, nor the occasional jealous stares from his classmates. To Carter, the world was nothing but formulas, theorems, and the dream of Harvard. But today, something was different. As Carter worked through a problem in the book, Rapid Calculation Methods in Spatial Geometry, a large shadow fell over his desk. "Carter Hayes?" A deep, calm voice spoke. Carter looked up. Standing before him was a middle-aged man, dressed in a neat black suit with a dark blue tie. His salt and pepper hair was neatly combed, and his silver-framed glasses reflected the dim library light. "Yes, that's me," Carter answered, his voice slightly hesitant. He had never seen this man before. "I am Michael Bennett, Dean of Applied Mathematics at Harvard University," the man introduced himself, smiling gently. "I came here to see you." For a moment, Carter thought he had misheard. Harvard? He stood up abruptly, his eyes wide with shock. Sit down, Carter. Let's talk like two people who love mathematics, Michael Bennett smiled, gesturing for Carter to sit back. But for the boy, his legs felt frozen. Why are you here? Carter stammered. Because of a friend of mine, Michael explained, pulling out a chair to sit across from Carter. He is an alumnus of Harvard and now a lecturer there. He happened to see a video of your presentation in class, the one where you demonstrated 3 different solutions to a math problem in front of your teacher. And he sent that video to me. Video? Carter's heart raced. But who recorded that video? Michael chuckled. One of your classmates. It seems your brilliance didn't just impress your teacher, but also inspired them to capture the moment. Carter was stunned. He never imagined that incident would become an opportunity for him to be noticed. But don't worry, Carter, Michael continued, his voice calm. I didn't come here to judge you. I came here because I was deeply impressed by your abilities. Not just your talent in mathematics, but your resilience and confidence when faced with a challenge. I just wanted to prove that I didn't cheat, Carter murmured, his voice fading. And you did more than that, Michael said, his eyes brightening. Harvard doesn't just look for brilliant minds, it looks for determined hearts. And you, Carter, have both. Carter felt like his heart was about to burst with emotion, but then a fear crept in. But I'm poor. My family can never afford Harvard. That is not something you need to worry about right now, Michael reassured him. Harvard has many scholarships for students who are outstanding, but face financial difficulties. And with your abilities, I believe you can definitely earn one of those scholarships. Carter lowered his head, his hands trembling slightly. But am I really worthy? Michael leaned forward, his gaze gentle but firm. What do you think? If you weren't worthy, would you have had the courage to stand in front of your entire class before a skeptical teacher and prove yourself right? Carter looked up, a newfound determination in his eyes. I am worthy, he said, this time with confidence. Michael smiled. Good. That's the spirit of a Harvard student. He stood up, reached into his pocket, and handed Carter a business card. This is my contact information. If you need any help during your application process to Harvard, don't hesitate to call me. And Carter, yes? Never let anyone tell you that you don't belong somewhere. You belong wherever you want to be. Michael Bennett walked away, leaving Carter standing there in a daze. His heart pounded like a drum, but not from fear, from hope. Carter clutched the business card tightly in his hand, his eyes burning with a newfound fire. For the first time in his life, the dream of Harvard didn't seem like a distant fantasy. It felt real. On Monday morning, Carter Hayes stepped into the classroom with a completely different feeling. No longer anxiety, fear, or insecurity. Today, Carter felt a quiet, steady confidence burning inside him. But not everyone was pleased with this newfound confidence, especially Mr. Whitmore. Since the video of Carter's incredible problem-solving had gone viral, Mr. Whitmore seemed like a changed man. No longer the strict but fair teacher he used to be, his gaze now carried a hint of bitterness, and whenever he looked at Carter, there was a trace of resentment hidden beneath. As soon as Carter sat down, Mr. Whitmore walked in with a stack of test papers in his hands. His face was stern, and his sharp eyes scanned the room, lingering slightly longer on Carter. We will have a surprise test today, Mr. Whitmore announced, his voice cold and clear. No books, no notes, no talking. This will be a test of pure thinking, and I want to see who is truly a genius in this class. A few students groaned softly. Carter remained calm, though a slight sense of unease crept in. He knew he was good at math, but a surprise test was always a challenge. Mr. Whitmore handed out the test papers to each student, but when he reached Carter's desk, he paused, staring at him with a sharp, almost mocking gaze. Carter, I hope you won't need any tricks to shine today, he said, his voice cutting like a blade. The classroom fell silent. Carter felt a rush of heat to his face, but he kept his voice steady. I never use tricks, sir. Mr. Whitmore didn't reply, only smirked slightly and placed the test on Carter's desk. The test began with complex arithmetic problems, but to Carter they were nothing more than a warm-up. The formulas in his mind connected seamlessly like a perfect chain. He moved from one question to another, his pencil gliding smoothly over the paper. But when he reached the final question, Carter's hand paused. It was a highly complex spatial geometry problem, one that would make even the best students hesitate. Carter stared at the page, his mind conjuring up the shapes, the angles, the dimensions. And then suddenly everything became clear. He smiled and began writing, his calculations flowing confidently. Time passed quickly. When the bell rang, Mr. Whitmore stood at the front of the class collecting the tests. When he reached Carter's desk, he paused again, his eyes filled with suspicion. "I hope you didn't just scribble nonsense," he muttered, but he didn't wait for an answer. Carter simply smiled, not saying a word. The next day, as soon as Carter entered the classroom, the air felt tense. Mr. Whitmore stood at the front, his hand holding the stack of graded tests. His face was a mask of cold seriousness. "The results of yesterday's test are out," he announced, his voice ringing with a sharp edge. And surprisingly, only one student achieved a perfect score. The room went silent. Every eye turned towards Carter. Some students whispered, a few even smirked. They had grown used to the idea that Carter was the best. "But there is a problem," Mr. Whitmore continued, and the atmosphere grew even heavier. "Carter's test is an exact match to the answer key I hold in my hand." Carter's eyes widened. "The answer key? But I never saw it." "Oh, really?" Mr. Whitmore raised an eyebrow. "Then how do you explain solving every question perfectly, even using the same extended methods that I had noted in the answer key?" "Sir, that's because I understand the problems," Carter tried to explain, his voice shaking. "Understand? Or did you have access to the answers beforehand?" His voice grew harsher. "I did not. I never cheated," Carter protested, his voice rising, his eyes starting to blur with tears. "Really? Then how can a poor boy with a janitor for a mother solve problems that even my best students struggle with?" Mr. Whitmore's words were sharp, slicing through the air. "Tell me, Carter, are you a genius or just a fraud?" The class whispered again. "A fraud? I knew it. He's too good to be true. Maybe he cheated all along." Carter's legs trembled. "I didn't cheat. I love math. I study every night," he murmured, his voice growing faint. "Oh? Love math, do you?" Mr. Whitmore stepped closer, his cold gaze piercing. "Then how about you solve another problem right now, one that you haven't seen before?" He quickly wrote a complex problem on the board, a problem that combined algebra, geometry, and calculus. "If you're so smart, Carter, show us." Carter stood still for a moment, but then a flicker of determination ignited in his eyes. He walked up to the board, picked up the chalk, and began writing. His mind raced, analyzing the problem, visualizing the shapes, building the equations. His hands moved swiftly, his voice steady as he explained each step. The class fell silent again, watching in awe as Carter pieced together the problem with a precision and clarity that even some teachers might struggle to achieve. In just a few minutes, he completed the solution, put down the chalk, and turned to face Mr. Whitmore. "Sir, that is the solution," Carter said, his voice clear, though his hands trembled slightly. Mr. Whitmore's face was pale. He glanced at the board, his eyes scanning the perfect solution. He had nothing left to say. But before anyone could react, the door to the classroom swung open. A deep, calm voice echoed through the room. "If I say this boy didn't just imagine the solution, but truly solved it with the most efficient method, what then?" Everyone turned. Standing at the door was Michael Bennett, Dean of Applied Mathematics at Harvard, with sharp yet warm eyes. Mr. Whitmore's face went white. Who are you?" "I am the person who will help bring the truth to light." Michael Bennett stepped into the room, his gaze gentle but unwavering on Carter. "And I think Carter Hayes deserves protection from baseless accusations." The air in the classroom thickened the moment Michael Bennett, Dean of Applied Mathematics at Harvard, stepped in. His sharp eyes scanned the room before settling on Carter Hayes, who still stood by the blackboard, his face pale but his eyes determined. Mr. Whitmore cleared his throat, struggling to regain control. "Excuse me, but this is my classroom. Who are you to walk in and interfere with my work?" Michael Bennett raised an eyebrow, a slight smile appearing on his lips. I am Michael Bennett, Dean of Applied Mathematics at Harvard, and I am here because I have heard of Carter Hayes. The room erupted in murmurs. Some students covered their mouths in shock. All eyes turned to Carter, but he felt a crushing pressure on his chest. Mr. Whitmore forced a smile, trying to hide his unease. Ah, Harvard. But I'm afraid this is an internal matter of my class. Carter is accused of cheating on his test, and I have the right to investigate. Cheating? Michael Bennett's voice was calm, but as sharp as a blade. That is a serious accusation, Mr. Whitmore. I have reviewed Carter's test, and I can assure you that what he did was not cheating. It was genius. Genius? Mr. Whitmore's sneer returned. You call copying problem-solving methods from an answer key genius? Michael Bennett stepped closer to the teacher's desk, his gaze unwavering. Mr. Whitmore, I am the one who created that problem. It is a special problem designed to test spatial thinking and optimization in mathematics. And Carter didn't just solve it correctly. He optimized his approach, something that even many of my graduate students cannot do. Impossible, Mr. Whitmore whispered, his face turning pale. But if that's true, how could a high school student like him? Genius is not confined by age or background, Michael Bennett stated firmly. But the sad truth is that we often refuse to recognize it because of our own arrogance. Carter stood there feeling his heart pounding wildly. But alongside his fear, a warm glow began to rise in his chest. He wasn't a cheater. He was truly good at math. And now someone stood by his side to defend him. Mr. Whitmore took a deep breath, trying to maintain his authority. But I cannot simply take your word for it, sir. I must ensure the integrity of this classroom. Michael Bennett smiled slightly, pulling a stack of papers from his briefcase and placing them on the teacher's desk. These are the step-by-step solutions Carter wrote down for the test problems. I asked him to recreate them after hearing about this situation. As you can see, not only are they correct, but they are even more refined than the answer key you provided. Mr. Whitmore picked up the papers, flipping through them, his hands trembling. Not only were the solutions correct, but Carter had even discovered a new method, one he hadn't considered. But how? He stammered. Because Carter is not just a good student. Michael Bennett's voice softened, but remained firm. He is a mathematical genius, and your attempt to crush his spirit is unacceptable. The classroom was dead silent. Every eye was on Mr. Whitmore, who looked as if he had just been exposed. I was only trying to ensure fairness. No one should be able to excel without being tested, Mr. Whitmore tried to argue. Fairness doesn't mean crushing young talent, Michael Bennett countered. It means creating a space for it to grow. He then turned to Carter, smiling gently. Carter, would you like to show everyone here once again that you truly deserve the title of a math prodigy? Carter swallowed hard, but his eyes were burning with determination. Yes, sir. Excellent. There is a whiteboard and a marker here. Solve the problem again, but this time, explain every step to the whole class. Carter stepped up to the board, marker in hand. At first, his hands were slightly shaky, but as he began to write, everything became clear. His mind was sharp, visualizing the geometric shapes, calculating the equations, and translating his thoughts into precise, flowing lines of math. The students were mesmerized. Even those who usually struggled with math leaned forward, watching closely. In just a few minutes, Carter completed the problem flawlessly. He turned back, facing the class. And that's how I solved the problem, Carter stated, his voice steady, though his heart raced. Michael Bennett clapped, and immediately the class erupted in loud applause. Some students even stood up, cheering. A few who used to mock Carter now looked at him with admiration. Mr. Whitmore stood frozen, his face drained of color. But then he turned away, hiding his expression as he pretended to resume the lesson. Yet everyone knew that from this moment, no one could deny Carter Hayes' intelligence and talent. Michael Bennett walked over to Carter, placing a reassuring hand on his shoulder. Harvard needs minds like yours, Carter, and I want to personally ensure that you have a place there. Carter's eyes widened. Really, sir? I can actually go to Harvard? Not only can you go, Michael smiled warmly, but you deserve it. But among the cheering students, one pair of eyes remained cold and bitter. Mr. Whitmore's dark and furious. A quiet hatred simmered within him. And that was a sign that for Carter Hayes, this battle was far from over. Carter Hayes felt like he was living in a dream. In just one day, he had gone from being accused of cheating to becoming the star of his class. A math prodigy officially recognized by the Dean of Applied Mathematics at Harvard. Everything felt like a whirlwind. But amid the admiring glances and the congratulatory handshakes, a growing sense of unease lingered in Carter's heart. Mr. Whitmore did not appear in class the next day. A substitute teacher took over, explaining that Mr. Whitmore was on leave. But Carter wasn't naive enough to believe that. As he walked through the school hallway, whispers followed him like shadows. Did you hear? They say he's a genius. Harvard? Wow, I can't even get a scholarship to the local college. I heard Mr. Whitmore got kicked out for humiliating him. And along with the admiration came the jealousy. Some students who used to look down on Carter now avoided his gaze. Others stared at him with resentment, as if he had stolen something that should have been theirs. Carter tried to focus on his studies, but everything seemed hazy. He just wanted peace, to study without being watched or whispered about. But attention now clung to him like a dark shadow. After class, Carter packed his books, preparing to leave, when he noticed Jamal, one of the boys who used to mock him, waiting by the door. Carter hesitated. "Hey, Carter," Jamal called out, his voice unusually quiet. "Can we talk?" "About what?" Carter asked, wary. "I just wanted to say I'm sorry. I was wrong to think you were cheating." Jamal looked away, avoiding Carter's eyes. "You're really good, and I was just jealous." A bit of tension left Carter's shoulders. "It's okay, Jamal. We all make mistakes." Jamal smiled slightly, but his eyes darted around nervously. "But you need to be careful, Carter. Not everyone is happy about you becoming the school hero." "What do you mean?" Carter frowned. "I heard that Mr. Whitmore isn't gone. He's just laying low, and he's really angry. There are rumors that he's planning to get his revenge." A chill ran down Carter's spine. Revenge? But how? "I don't know for sure, but with someone like him, he won't let this go easily." Jamal glanced at Carter one last time before disappearing into the crowd of students leaving for home. That night, Carter sat at his small study desk, staring at the pages of his math book, but none of the words made sense. Images of Mr. Whitmore's cold, bitter eyes kept flashing in his mind. He had thought everything was over when Dean Bennett defended him, but now he realized it was just the beginning of another fight, one that was darker and more dangerous. The next morning, Carter arrived at school early, planning to spend some time in the library, his usual place of refuge. But as he stepped into the schoolyard, he saw an unusual sight, a group of students crowded around the notice board, whispering and murmuring. "Did you see it? This is insane. Maybe he's not really a genius. What if he did cheat?" Carter's heart raced. He pushed his way through the crowd to see the notice. It was a letter, printed in bold with bright red text. Urgent notice. The investigation into the cheating allegations against student Carter Hayes has been reopened. Any new evidence will be considered. Students are requested not to spread rumors without verification. Carter's world seemed to spin. Reopened? But why? Dean Bennett cleared me already. Just then, a heavy hand rested on his shoulder. Carter turned to see an elderly man with a stern expression, silver hair, and sharp eyes. "Carter Hayes, I am Mr. Anderson, the vice principal. Please come with me to my office immediately." Carter's heart pounded as he followed Mr. Anderson. Behind him, the whispering grew louder, and the students' eyes followed him like vultures. In Mr. Anderson's office, Carter sat across from the stern-faced administrator, his hands trembling slightly. "Carter, a new anonymous letter has been sent to the school administration, accusing you of not only cheating on the recent test, but also in several other exams. We have to investigate this to maintain fairness." Mr. Anderson's voice was calm but cold. "But that's a lie. Dean Bennett already proved I didn't cheat." Carter's voice was on the edge of panic. "I understand, but this letter provides very detailed information. We cannot ignore it. Who sent it? Carter's voice trembled. That is something we are investigating. But trust me, Carter, if you are innocent, the truth will prevail. But Carter felt a growing fear gnawing at him. Someone was trying to destroy his life, and only one name came to his mind. Mr. Whitmore Carter walked home that evening, his face pale and his steps heavy. At home, his mother, Angela Hayes, was already waiting, her face anxious. "Carter, what's wrong?" she asked, rushing to his side. "They reopened the investigation, Mom. They're saying I might have cheated." "Again!" Carter's voice broke. Angela hugged him tightly, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "You didn't do anything wrong, Carter. We will fight this together." But even as Angela's comforting words wrapped around him, a cold, dark fear continued to grow inside Carter. His hands trembled as he gripped his mother's embrace, but somewhere within him, a small ember of determination still burned. He had to fight. He had to find out who was behind this and stop them. The atmosphere at school had become suffocating, like a sweltering summer day. Carter Hayes had become the center of everyone's attention, but not in the way he had once dreamed. Wherever he went, prying eyes, whispered rumors, and disdainful looks followed him. "See? I told you, there's no way a kid like him could be that good. Always sitting in the library. Who knows if he's secretly copying answers from somewhere? He's just a fraud." Carter tried to ignore the gossip, but each whispered word felt like an invisible knife stabbing into his pride. He sat alone in the quiet corner of the library, gripping an old math book so tightly that his knuckles turned white, but the words blurred before his eyes. The library door suddenly swung open, and Carter's heart skipped a beat when he saw Jamal walk in. But this time, Jamal didn't carry his usual mocking expression. Instead, he looked serious. He approached and sat down across from Carter. "Hey," Jamal began, "are you okay?" "What do you think?" Carter forced a bitter smile, but the fatigue in his eyes was clear. "I heard about the letter. Someone's trying to take you down. And I think I know who it is," Carter replied, his voice low. "Mr. Whitmore." Jamal raised an eyebrow. "You think he's behind this?" "Who else?" "He's the only one who hates me enough to do this." Jamal thought for a moment, then nodded. "You might be right, but we need proof, Carter. We can't just rely on a hunch." Carter stayed silent. He knew Jamal was right, but how could he find proof when everything was hidden in the shadows? That evening, Carter returned home with a heavy heart. The small apartment he shared with his mother seemed darker than ever. Angela had already heard about the letter. She tried to be strong for her son, but Carter could see the worry in her eyes. "You did nothing wrong, Carter. I know that. And I will always believe you." She took his hands in hers, rough and calloused from long hours of work. "But what if they don't believe me? What if they kick me out of school? What if Harvard finds out and rejects me?" Carter's voice broke as tears welled up in his eyes. "No, don't think like that, my son." Angela pulled him into a tight hug. "The truth always prevails. We just need to prove it." Carter wiped his tears, feeling a small spark of determination reignite. He couldn't let fear control him. He had to do something. The next day during lunch, Carter went back to the library. Not to study, but to investigate. He knew that if Mr. Whitmore was behind the letter, he must have left a trace. The library computers were used by all students, but Carter guessed that Mr. Whitmore, in his arrogance, might have made a mistake. Sitting at one of the library computers, Carter quickly accessed the system folder, searching for recently edited files. He scanned the file names, his heart pounding faster. Suddenly, a line caught his eye. File. Accusation. Letter. Carter Hayes.x. Last edited 2 days ago. Account. Whitmore_T. Carter's breath stopped. His hands trembled slightly. That was the proof he needed. But just as he reached for his USB drive to save the file, a heavy hand landed on his shoulder. "Looking for something, Carter?" The cold voice of Mr. Whitmore echoed right behind him. Carter tried to steady his breathing. He swallowed hard and slowly turned to face Mr. Whitmore's cold, piercing stare. "No, sir. I was just looking for study materials." "Study materials?" Mr. Whitmore's voice was dripping with contempt. Then why are you exploring the library system folder? That's not a place for students to snoop around. I was just curious. Mr. Whitmore leaned closer, his face so near that Carter could feel his cold breath. Curiosity is good, Carter, but sometimes it leads to trouble. Carter felt a chill run down his spine. He knew. Mr. Whitmore knew Carter had found the file. Sir, did you write that letter? Carter mustered the courage to ask, his voice trembling. Mr. Whitmore's lips curled into a cruel smile. You think you're clever, don't you, Carter? But your intelligence is not something everyone wants to see. Sometimes knowing too much is a burden. And with that, Mr. Whitmore straightened his jacket and walked out of the library, leaving Carter frozen in fear. He knows, and now he's going to destroy me. That night, Carter told his mother everything. The letter, his suspicions, and the confrontation with Mr. Whitmore. Mom, what should I do? I can't let him destroy everything I've worked for. Angela thought for a moment, her face pale but determined. Carter, you cannot fight someone like him alone. We need someone who can help us, someone with authority. But who? What about Dean Bennett? Angela suggested. He stood up for you once. If you tell him everything, maybe he can help again. Carter thought for a moment, then nodded. Yes, Dean Bennett. He's my only hope. But Carter didn't know that in the darkness, Mr. Whitmore was already preparing another plan. A plan to completely push Carter out of school and shatter his Harvard dream. The next morning, Carter Hayes walked into the classroom with dark circles under his eyes, a clear sign of a sleepless night. His mind was consumed with thoughts of Mr. Whitmore, the accusation letter, and the quiet hostility of his classmates. But he knew he couldn't give up. Not now. He needed to speak with Dean Bennett, the only person who had stood up for him before. During the lunch break, Carter knocked on the door of Dean Bennett's office. The math professor looked up from a stack of graded papers and smiled when he saw Carter. Carter, come in. You look tired. Is everything okay? Carter closed the door, took a deep breath, and told him everything. The letter, the rumors, the confrontation with Mr. Whitmore in the library. Dean Bennett's expression grew serious. He leaned against his desk, arms crossed. Carter, what you're describing is serious. If Mr. Whitmore is truly behind this, it is not just unethical. It's a violation of his duty as a teacher. But we can't just accuse him without solid evidence. But I found the letter file with his username in the library system, Carter exclaimed. But when I tried to save it, he caught me. So he knows you have discovered his involvement? Dean Bennett asked, his gaze sharpening. Carter nodded. He even threatened me, in his own way. Dean Bennett thought for a moment, then reached into his desk drawer and pulled out a small USB drive. Carter, here's what we will do. You will go back to the library during lunch. Use this USB. It will automatically copy any file you access, including the file you mentioned. And if Mr. Whitmore appears again, what then? Carter asked, nervous but hopeful. I will be nearby. We will face him together. That afternoon, Carter entered the library with the USB drive in his pocket, his heart pounding. The familiar scent of old paper usually calmed him, but today it only heightened his anxiety. He sat down at the same computer, quickly plugging in the USB. With a deep breath, he opened the system folder again. His eyes scanned the file list, and then he saw it. File, accusation letter carterhayes.x. Last edited 3 days ago. Account, Whitmore T. There it was. His heart raced. He clicked on the file, and the USB immediately began copying it. But just as it finished, a shadow fell over the screen. Didn't I warn you, Carter? Mr. Whitmore stood right behind him, his face calm, but his eyes filled with cold anger. Carter turned, trying to hide his fear. I was just looking for the file. The file that you think will save you? The file that you believe can prove your innocence? Mr. Whitmore leaned down, his voice a cold whisper. Let me tell you something, Carter. No one will believe you. No one cares about the truth. They only care about what they see. That's not true, Carter said, trying to keep his voice steady. Dean Bennett believes me. He knows I didn't cheat. Dean Bennett? Mr. Whitmore's lips twisted into a mocking smile. He won't be able to help you. Once I'm done, you won't just lose your place in this school. You will lose your dream of Harvard. Are you so sure of that? A calm, authoritative voice echoed from the library entrance. Mr. Whitmore straightened, his smile fading instantly. Standing by the door was Dean Bennett, his expression calm but his gaze sharp as a blade. "Bennett, what are you doing here?" Whitmore stuttered. "Protecting a student from a corrupt teacher," Dean Bennett replied, stepping forward. "We know about the letter, Mr. Whitmore, and I believe Carter has just secured the proof we need." Mr. Whitmore's face turned pale. "You can't do this. No one will believe a poor boy and a powerless math teacher over me. I have taught here for years. My reputation—" "Your reputation," Dean Bennett's voice grew firmer. "Your reputation is about to be judged by the school board, and I assure you, they care about integrity more than they care about your tenure." Realizing he was cornered, Mr. Whitmore's arrogance turned to desperation. "This is all his fault." He pointed at Carter. "A nobody from a poor family, thinking he deserves Harvard. He needs to learn his place." "Enough!" Dean Bennett's voice was sharp as a whip. "The only person who needs to learn their place here is you, Mr. Whitmore." The library fell silent. Carter felt his knees trembling, but a warm, reassuring hand settled on his shoulder. "It's over, Carter," Dean Bennett whispered. Later that day in the principal's office, Mr. Whitmore sat with his head hung low, the evidence against him laid out on the table. The principal's stern gaze never left him. "Mr. Whitmore, your actions are a severe violation of your duties as an educator. Falsifying accusations against a student, trying to sabotage a young man's future out of spite, this is beyond disgraceful." Mr. Whitmore looked up, his face pale, sweat dripping down his forehead. "Please, I was only trying to maintain academic integrity." "By destroying an innocent student's reputation?" Dean Bennett countered, standing beside Carter. "You were never interested in the truth, only in your pride." The decision was swift. Mr. Whitmore was suspended immediately, pending a formal investigation by the school board. As he was escorted out of the school, his once proud posture was reduced to a slumped, defeated figure. Back in the hallway, Carter felt a weight lift from his chest. His classmates, who had once whispered and sneered, now looked at him with admiration, even shame. Some tried to apologize, but Carter simply smiled, not holding any grudge. As they stepped outside, Dean Bennett looked at Carter. "Carter, your fight is over. The truth won." "Thank you. Thank you for everything," Carter whispered, tears welling up in his eyes. "You don't need to thank me, Carter. You fought for yourself. I just helped make sure you had a fair fight." "But what happens now?" Carter asked, his voice filled with cautious hope. Dean Bennett smiled, handing Carter a crisp white envelope. "This is an official letter from Harvard. They have reviewed your case, and they want you." Carter's hands trembled as he opened the letter. His eyes scanned the words. "Dear Carter Hayes, congratulations. We are pleased to offer you a full scholarship to Harvard University. Your exceptional mathematical abilities and your unwavering perseverance have shown that you are exactly the kind of student we are proud to welcome." Carter's tears finally spilled over. He looked up at Dean Bennett, who smiled with pride. "I told you, Carter. Never let anyone tell you that you don't belong somewhere.